Okay, before we go to process costing, take note that this topic will be easier for you if you were able to grasp the basic concepts of costs, cost flows, costing systems, together with job order costing. Okay, so after those discussions, you can now proceed to process costing. Now, to compare process costing, first we're going to discuss the similarities between job order and process costing. Now, take note that both of these systems will assign labor, material, and overhead costs to products, and they are going to provide a means for us to compute the unit product cost. Now, take note, this is one of the things that you have to focus on, how these systems assign these different costs and how do they compute unit product cost. Also, both systems will use manufacturing accounts, the same manufacturing accounts, even for your inventory accounts like raw materials, work in process, and finished goods. Okay, and you also have your manufacturing overhead. Ayan. The flow of cost through the manufacturing accounts is basically the same with both systems, which means the accumulation of cost will start from raw materials, upon purchase, and then once the cost of materials used has been assigned to work in process, you will now add your labor cost and overhead cost. Once they are completed, it will now be transferred and accumulated in finished goods. Okay, we will review the cost flows later. Now, before I forget, this material is actually a material from the book of Garrison, with very minimal editing lang yung ginawa ko. Anyway, so these are the similarities. You also have the differences. For process costing, this is used when a single product is produced on a continuing basis. So, tuloy-tuloy lang, for a long period of time. Job order costing is used when many different jobs are worked on each period. Okay, for process costing, this accumulates cost by department. Okay, so by department, ibig sabihin by work in process 1. Okay, in some books you will see work in process 1 and work in process 2. Okay, this means that this is a work in process account maintained in department 1, and this one is work in process maintained in department 2. For job order costing systems, the costs are accumulated by individual jobs. Okay, so ayun. Process costing, use department production reports. You have your cost of production reports, which we will discuss later. While for job order costing, the counterpart is your job cost sheets. Okay, so if you can understand your job cost sheets, madali na lang siguro yung cost of production report. And then you also have your process costing system. Process costing systems compute unit cost by department, gaya ng diniscuss natin kanina dito. Job order costing systems compute unit costs by job. Okay, so parang naulit lang, And if you want to add more, for job order costing, we use this if our products are, ganun pala, unique from one another. Like, for example, tailor-made suits, so you have your customized boots, so yung mga ganon. They are most of the time called heterogeneous products, Ang counterpart naman yan ay homogeneous products, doon sa process costing, when the characteristics of your product is the same, from product 1, product 2, product 3, yung output natin, they are the same. Most of the time we use process costing. And then, what is a processing department? Ayan, kasama sa basic concept. Normally, this refers to any location in an organization where your production costs are accumulated. This is where your materials, labor, or overhead are added to the product. Now, we have to take note that the activities performed in a processing department are performed uniformly. Pare-pareho. And because of that, eto na gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, your output must be homogeneous. No? Like for example, your output is, let's say, sardines. No? Sardines. The first can of sardine has the same characteristics with the second can, third can, yung mga ganon. Okay po. So, now, before we continue, I'd like to remind you that you can pause the video anytime. Feel free to take down notes, or to relieve yourselves, or feel free to rewind the material if it's needed. Okay, just in case you want to compute something, ayan, feel free to pause the video, get your calculator, your pen, and your scrap paper. Okay, so ayun. Now let's continue. Okay, in addition to that, you also have the concept of sequential versus parallel processing. Now, what are these? When we say sequential processing, this means that units will flow in a sequence from one department to another. Okay, so from department 1, department 2, department 3. Like for example, if your product is, let's say, ano ba yung maganda? O kunyari, sardinas na lang, di ba? Okay, upon catching the fish, assuming mega yan, mega. The production is done on the ship, no? So after catching the fish, you chop off the head, you clean the fish, you remove the intestine, so that is what you call department 1, preparation. And then department 2, you're going to cook the fish. Oh, ganun na, di ba? And then department 3, you're going to weigh them for packaging, in the cans. Okay, so let's call that canning. And then you have your labeling and packaging. So that's what you call sequential. Now, just in case, you're producing different kinds of sardines, like for example, at some point, some of your sardines will be in brine, and then some of them will be cooked in tomato paste, ayan, or tomato sauce, and then a part of that will become fried sardines, or hot and spicy. That is now your parallel processing. This is used when after a point some units go through a different processing department, different processing departments than others. So here's an example, like petroleum refinery, they separate crude oil into products like gasoline, jet fuel, and heating oil. So like our example, if you have your sardines, ayun nga, meron yung green, meron yung red, meron yung pulutan style, meron yung Spanish style. O, diba? So that's now your parallel processing. And pwedeng may combination, na at first sequential siya and then parallel processing. Anyway, so ayun. Now, still in the comparison of job order and process costing, this is the initial model, for job order and process costing. We all know that your manufacturing costs, your direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead are all accumulated in your work in process. Once they are completed, they will go to your finished goods inventory, and once they are sold, they will be part of your cost of goods sold. In job order costing, your costs are accumulated by job. So you have work in process, job number 1, work in process, job number 2. So if you have, let's say, 3 jobs, so ayun, 3 orders, then you will expect that you will be maintaining 3 work in processes or work in process accounts for each job. For process costing, this cost will be accumulated by department naman. Okay, so if you have 3 departments, you will expect that you will have 3 work in process. So ayun lang, very similar. Jobs, processing department, these are now your work in process. Okay po, now, let's continue, okay? Let's talk about the basic journal entries, okay? And in our example, we're going to assume that there are only two departments, Department A and Department B. And we will use T accounts, no, to help us visualize the cost flows. And as usual, okay, the cost flow, or the story will start in the acquisition of your raw materials, okay, and then once they are used, they will now go to our work in process as our direct materials. Now, based on this example, no, if paano ba? If in this example, you will see the simultaneous issuance of direct materials to work in process A and work in process B, it's also possible that these direct materials, okay, to Department B will only be issued upon the transfer of the output coming from Department A to Department B, which I will explain later. Now, in this case, okay, we are showing you this type of cost flow so that you can visualize and you will know what will be the journal entry if your materials are issued to Department A, or if they are issued to Department B, or if they are issued simultaneously. If they are issued simultaneously, you have the following journal entry. Okay po? So, the same as job order costing. Now, what if you incurred direct labor? So, this is now the journal entry. Again, this is under the assumption that they are incurred simultaneously, no, for Department A and Department B. Okay? That's the journal entry. And for overhead, okay, same entry as job order costing. You are going to debit manufacturing overhead, no, for the actual, and once they are applied, okay, that will be the credit side. What will be debited? It will be your work in process for Department A and work in process for Department B. So assuming they are simultaneously applied, you can ayan, record them this way. Okay po. Now, once the output, no, of Department A is transferred to Department B, okay, syempre, okay, this will now be assigned. Okay, that's the term. This cost, no, the cost of these materials or output or products which are not yet finished, no, but already finished, okay, as far as Department A is concerned, kunyari. So, you are now going to assign that to Department B. The journal entry will be debit to work in process Department B and credit work in process Department A. Okay, so yun. Now, let's go back to the previous slide. This is what I was referring to earlier. Based on our example, your direct materials, okay, direct labor, and overhead, okay, were simultaneously applied and recorded. But sometimes, no, this will only be recorded, okay, once the output of A has been transferred to B. Diba? Like for example, if we are working on a product that has to be kunyari, ano ba? Let's talk about furniture. So, ayan. If the furniture is, let's say, in Department A, and Department A is layout. Ayan. Yun yung mga process ng Department A. From layouting, okay, to cutting, up to assembly. O, yun yung Department A. No? And then, let's say, Department B is focused on finishing. Ayan. Siyempre, okay, you cannot refine or finish a product that is not yet assembled. Kaya pag minsan nauuna ito eh. Okay, to record this transfer before you record direct materials, direct labor, and applied overhead. Okay po? Now, let's continue. Once these products are completed, no, assuming Department B is your last process or last department, okay, once they are completed, they will be transferred to your finished goods, okay, and the journal entry will be debit to finished goods and credit to work in process. Diba? And then, Okay, once they are sold, they will be part of your cost of goods sold. And to record that, don't forget to record the sale, assuming it was sold on credit. So that will be debit to accounts receivable and credit sales. And of course, okay, you debit your cost of goods sold and credit your finished goods. Ayun. This is under the assumption that we are using the perpetual inventory system. Ayan. Let's talk about EUP. Okay, what is EUP or equivalent units of production? Okay. Sabi, EUP or equivalent units are the product of the number of partially completed units and the percentage completion of those units. And we need to calculate your EUP. Okay. Why? So that you can compute your product cost, or not the product cost per unit of output. Mamaya discuss natin yon doon sa cost of production report. Sabi niya, we need to calculate equivalent units because a department usually has some partially completed units in its beginning and ending inventory. Okay, so assuming there are two half products, ayan, two half completed products, they are equivalent to one completed product. So, assuming, okay, at the end of the period, you started to let's say, ayan, ganyan na lang. Let's use the example from Garrison. No? Assuming that these are two units, but they are not yet full, they are just 50% completed. So this is your accomplishment for the period. If you add them together, it's as good as completing one product. Okay. Kunyari, magaling akong mag-drawing. Ayan. So, 10,000 units which are 70% complete is as good as completing 7,000 units. Okay, so yun lang naman yung concept ng equivalent units of production or EUP. Okay? Okay, you have your quick check. For the current period, Jones started 15 units and completed 10,000 units, leaving 5,000 units in process. Okay, so let's try to understand that, no? Jones started at 15, but 10,000 of that was completed. So at the end of the period, 5,000 is in your inventory. These are your work in process, and they are 30% complete. Okay, so ibig sabihin, it's as good as completing, okay, 30% of 5,000 units. So what is 30% of 5,000? That is 1,500. Don't forget to add what was actually completed, which is 15. Okay, so if you add that, you will now have 11,500 units. Even though you actually computed or completed 10,000 units, but the work done during the period is equivalent to completing 11,500. Okay po? So, ayun, nandun pala yung computation. Sorry, I got carried away. So, now you have 11,500. Ayun. Calculating EUP, okay, there are two ways on how you can compute for your EUP. You have your first in, first out, and you have your weighted average method. We will start discussing your weighted average method because after that, I can show you the shortcut for the first in, first out method. Okay, so under weighted average method, okay, this method makes no distinction between work done in prior or current periods. Why? Because this is under the assumption that the costs incurred this period and last period, okay, has no significant difference. Ayun. And then it blends together units and costs from prior and current periods. Let's have an example later. Anyway, yan, may dagdag pa pala. Your cost per equivalent unit, okay, ito yung sinabi ko kanina, why do you have to compute for your EUP? So that you can compute for the cost per equivalent unit. And for weighted average method, you have your cost for the period, divided by your equivalent units of production for the period. Okay, now take note that most of the time when we talk about cost for the period, we are just talking about or referring to your total manufacturing cost for this period. Okay, pero for weighted average, para hindi kayo malito, your cost this period will include the beginning balance, no, the beginning balance of your work in process. The cost, I'm referring to the cost of the beginning balance, okay, plus the cost this period, or your total manufacturing cost for this period. I-drawing ko na nga para hindi kayo malito. Let's review your work in process, okay? Your T accounts for work in process, okay, will have cost from the beginning balance and cost of your ending balance, tama? And then for the current period, okay, you are going to include, ano yung mga include natin? You have your direct materials, direct labor, and you have your factory overhead. Ayan. Most of the time when we talk about cost for the period, we are simply referring to these three, your total manufacturing cost, okay? But for weighted average, pag sinabi mong cost this period, okay, you are going to include even the cost of your beginning work in process. Okay po? So, let's have a short moment for you to internalize that. For weighted average method, your cost this period, you include the beginning balance of your work in process plus your total manufacturing cost. And then you divide that by your EUP using the weighted average. Now, let's continue. Okay, so you have the following cost: direct labor, direct materials, okay, and then dapat nga ito factory overhead. Yan. But sometimes, no, maliit lang naman yung direct labor. We already combine that with your factory overhead, okay? And you will now have your direct materials and then your conversion cost. Okay po. So, ayun. Why do we do that? Especially for uneven production. Pag sinabi nating uneven, okay, the percentage of completion for each component is not the same. When we say even, the percentage of completion for each component is the same. For example, no, if there is a direct causality of your direct labor cost with the direct materials, then you can use even. What does that mean? If materials is 50% completed, we can assume that direct labor is also 50% completed. The same with factory overhead. But sometimes, okay, what is normal is that we have uneven percentage of completion. What does that mean? It's possible, let's say that your materials is already 100% completed or 80% completed, but your labor is only 20 or 50% completed. Okay, so that's what you call uneven application. Okay, now let's continue. Let's assume that we have the following units, okay, units produced for the month. Okay, we started with 300 units, okay, for our beginning inventory, and then you started 6,000 units. So this means that the total units that you can finish for the current period is 6,300. Let's try to write that down, okay? You have a beginning balance of 300. You started, okay? You started in process 6,000 units. At the end of the period, you have 900. Okay, this means that you were able to complete, okay, how many units? 5,400 units. This is what you call completed and transferred. This is the ending balance. Okay, your completed and transferred, of course, okay, since this is process costing, no, it is safe to assume that this 300 will be completed ahead of your 6,000, right? So 300 of that will go to 5,400, which means, okay, out of this 6,000, no, out of this 6,000, only 5,100 was completed. Okay po, so this 5,100 is now what you call started, completed, and transferred. This is your started in process. This is your completed and transferred. This is your started, completed, and transferred. Okay po, so let's try to analyze this, no? If 300 was already completed, okay, so kasama siya dun. And then, since you completed 5,400, the difference, which is 5,100, will come from the 6,000. Okay, and the difference of these two, okay, if 6,000, no, 5,100 of that is completed, the difference is 900. Yan yung, ayan, incomplete. Ay, hindi pa siya kompleto. Okay po, so you now have 5,400, your unit completed and transferred out. Okay, meaning it's transferred to another department siguro. Okay, and the ending balance is now 900. Now, also from the example, okay, these 300 units, okay, your beginning inventory, no, when it comes to materials, okay, 40% of the materials is already computed or completed. For conversion naman, 20% of your conversion cost. Kahit cost na lang para mas madaling i-visualize. Okay, 20% of your conversion costs were already incurred to come up with these 300 units. Okay po. Now, there are different ways on how you can compute this percentage of completion. Okay, most of the time, no, well, you have your based on input and based on output. Since this is cost accounting, most of the time, this is based on input. What does that mean? Okay, we base it on the total estimated cost. So, for example, if, let's say, for this output, no, for this expected output, you're supposed to spend 100,000 in materials, and then you already spent, no, let's say, or you already issued 60,000 out of 100,000, then that means materials is already 60% completed. Okay, so ayun yun. Anyway, that will be discussed in other topics. Now, for work in process, okay, materials is 60% completed and your conversion cost is 30% completed. Now, from there, you can now compute your equivalent units of production. For weighted average, okay, madali lang yan, you start with the units completed and transferred, okay, or completed and transferred units lang. So you have 5,400 and then you add, no, the percentage of completion, okay, from your ending inventory. So if materials is 60% completed, so you simply multiply that with 900 units. For conversion, 30% of that was completed, so you multiply that by 900 units. Feel free to pause the video, okay, and go back to the previous slide, no, para malaman nyo kung saan nanggaling yan. Dito yan, oh. Tara! Okay, so you have your 900, 60, and 30. There you go. You multiply that, and this is now your EUP using weighted average. Okay, so this means that, well, if you try to look at your efforts in terms of materials, even though you only completed and transferred 5,400 units, it's as if you completed, or your efforts, no, your efforts in terms of material is as good as coming up with 5,940 units. So, ganun din sa conversion. Even if you only completed 5,400, it's as good as completing 5,670. Okay po. So, ayun. So, that's your weighted average EUP. Now, sabi niya, equivalent units of production is always equal to units completed and transferred plus the equivalent units remaining in work in process. Okay, so if you go back to your T accounts, no, yung sinulat ko kanina, siya na yan. Okay, so let's continue. Weighted average. So, eto na nga siya. Okay, you started 5,400 but you already have 300 units that should be completed, no, for this period. Also, which means out of 5,400, if you completed 300 of that came from your beginning balance. Ibig sabihin yan, 5,100 came from the 6,000 units started during the period. And out of 6,000, if 5,100 was completed, okay, 900 will be your ending inventory. Okay po? Ayan, so you have 54 plus 540, what is completed at the end of the period. Yung equivalent units niya, you now have your total equivalent units of production. That's for materials, and then the same explanation for conversion cost. Okay. Now, before we continue, okay, let's talk about your cost of production report. Okay, basically, there are different kinds of formats, no, found in your textbook, okay, in other books. Ewan ko ba, basta pag iba yung author, iba na rin yung format nila. But if you try to look at the components of this cost of production report, what is common is that it will always have three sections. The first section is the computation of EUP. The second section, okay, will show you the cost to be accounted for, and then the third section, okay, you will have the cost as accounted for, also known as the reconciliation. Okay, so ayun, for Garrison, no, since this is his material, the first section, okay, will show a quantity schedule showing the flow of units and the computation of EUP. So yun na nga. And then computation of cost per equivalent unit. But in this section, okay, you will also show the total cost to be accounted for. I'll explain that later. And then third section, yun na nga, the reconciliation. Okay, comparison of the cost to be accounted for and the cost as accounted for, and they should always be equal. Okay, so let's have an example. Assuming, sabi niya, this company uses the weighted average method of process costing to determine unit cost, okay, in shaping and milling department. And you have the following information. Again, feel free to pause the video and take a screenshot, no, or take notes, no, of what is given, because our discussion, no, will be based on the following information. But first things first, okay, you have the beginning, which is 200 units. You have the ending, which is 400. You started 5,000 units and then you completed 4,800. 200, 400, you started 5,000 and you completed 4,800. Of course, the total should be 5,200, 5,200. Now, this 200 will be completed, so it will go there. Okay, this means the difference of this now, no, 4,800 minus 200, you will now have 4,600 is now your started during the period. It's also completed and transferred. Okay po. So, out of this 5,000, 4,600 was started, completed, and transferred. So, what is not transferred? The difference of these two, which is now 400. Okay po. Now, the cost of the beginning work in process is this one. If you have your calculator, paki-compute nga. So, this one will be 75, 6 plus 5, that's going to be 11, carry 1, so that will now be 15. Okay? And then, yan, yung mga may calculator dyan, paki-pause muna tapos kunin nyo yung total nito. Okay, now, kunyari na total muna. Let's continue. Okay, step 1, prepare the quantity schedule with the equivalent units. Okay, so you have the beginning. You started 5,000, a total of 5,2. Okay, and then let's compute for the AUP. No? Okay, so you have your completed and transferred. Take note, for weighted average, we always start with this 48. And then, you add the percentage of completion of the ending inventory, which is 400, 40% for materials, 25% for conversion, and you now have the following cost. This is now your equivalent unit of production. Okay? And then, step 2, you calculate the cost per equivalent unit for the period. So, gaya ng sinabi natin kanina, this will include the beginning balance, the cost from the beginning work in process, plus your cost this month. Okay, we like to call it cost this month, which is actually your total manufacturing cost for the current period. Okay, so let's try to add that. Ito yan. Yung beginning, 15,175 ba yung na-compute natin kanina? Balik-balik tayo. Ayan. Ayun. 15,175 nga. Plus the total of these two, which is already here. That's now your cost for the period. Okay po. Ayun. Pala yun eh. If you total that, you will get this. So this is your total cost to be accounted for. Kumbaga, saan nang galing yan? If you go to your work in process, your total cost to be accounted for is actually the total of the beginning balance and your total manufacturing cost. Also known as your total cost placed in process. Okay. And then, cost as accounted for, pupunta yan sa ending balance at saka sa cost of goods manufactured. Or, if they are not yet finished, balikan natin, assuming that it will go to another department, you can call this completed and transferred. The cost of how much was completed and transferred. Okay po. So this is now the total cost for your materials and conversion, okay, coming from the beginning and this month, divided by the equivalent units of production, and the cost per AUP will be 76.25 and you will have 72.75 for a total of, ay nandito na pala, total ka pa dyan, ayun na pala. Okay, so you now have 149, okay, for materials and conversion. Okay po, so ayun lang, this divided by that, and then this divided by that one. Now you have your total cost to be accounted for, okay, and the cost per equivalent unit of production. You can now go to reconciliation. Now this cost, the total cost to be accounted for should be equal to the cost as accounted for. Saan ba yan pumunta? Okay, so if you were able to complete 4,800 this period, okay, add the work in process at the end, which is 160 and 100. Saan ulit nanggaling yung 160 and 100? That is the ending inventory times the percentage of completion for materials and conversion. Okay, which is, ayun, 160 and 100. 400 times 40%. 400 times 25%. There you go. Okay, chill lang. Okay. Relax lang. Now, let's continue. Transferred out or completed, which is 48 plus the percentage of completion for the ending inventory. Okay. These are the costs. Okay. Ito, saan naman nanggaling yung mga yan? This is actually yung 12,200 na yan. This is yung cost kanina, which is dito yun eh. 76.25 times 160 units. Ayun, 160 times 76.25. What about this? This is actually 100 units. Siya yun. Okay, 100 units times 72.75. Okay, the cost per EUP for conversion cost, okay, and the cost per EUP for your materials. Okay, now you multiply that and then you add, okay, the total is 734,675, which is the same as your cost to be accounted for. Okay po, so ganun lang po siya. That's for your weighted average. Okay, you try to put step 1, step 2, and step 3 together in one report. You now have your cost of production report. Operation costing. Okay, this is also known as hybrid costing. Okay, why hybrid? Because it is a combination of job order and process costing, no? Pwedeng at the beginning, parang job order muna yan, okay, and then at some point, okay, you're going to apply the concepts for process costing, okay. Like for example, if your TI na lang yan, if your business is like TI, no, may magpapa-customize. Kaya nga lang, yung product, it's not just 1 or 2 units, okay. Okay, one job order is composed of a lot of units. So, di pare-pareho sila ng ng feature and characteristics. Okay, so, job order muna yan, okay. Then, at some point, magiging process costing siya kapag sabay-sabay na siya. Okay, if we're talking about batches na. Let's talk about FIFO method. Okay, for FIFO method, okay, this one is actually better, no, than weighted average method kasi it considers, no, or it's applicable especially if there is a significant difference in the cost incurred this year and last year, or this period and last period. Ayun. It also considers, no, the percentage of completion from your beginning inventories. Now, there are different ways on how you can compute the EUP. I'll show you the shortcut later. Okay, but first, gamitin muna natin yung discussion ni Garrison. Ayan, let's revisit. Sa inyo, this is our earlier example. Okay, so you have 300 at the beginning. You started with 6,000 units, so you're supposed to complete 6,300 units, but you only completed 5,400, which means, okay, 54 minus 300, so that's 5,100 came from 6,000. Tama po? Saan nanggaling yun? That's 54 minus 300. Okay? So, you now have 51. Okay? Yun yung galing sa 6,000. So, 6,000 minus 51, that is now 900 units. Okay? O di kung gusto mo, just the basic lang. You started with 300. Okay? At the beginning, okay, you started in process 6,000. Okay, so you now have 63, but you completed 5,400. What is left is 900 units. Okay. Let's compute for your EUP. This is actually your EUP using your weighted average. Okay. Pero wait lang. We are using FIFO method, di ba? Actually, from the EUP, no, using weighted average, ito yung shortcut na sinasabi ko. You simply deduct the percentage of completion from the beginning of your work in process, and you will now have your EUP using FIFO. Okay, that's the easiest approach. Okay, once you have the EUP using FIFO, you can now, di ba? Ulitin natin. For materials, eto yun. Okay, you have 5,940. This is your EUP for weighted average. If you deduct 120, you will now have your EUP for FIFO. Pwede mo palang pagsabayin yung EUP ng weighted average na yan tsaka FIFO eh. Diba? Same with conversion cost. Ganun din po yung approach. Okay? So, ayun. Na-excite ako masyado. Nandito pala yung discussion. Okay. So, that's the only difference. No? The percentage of completion for your beginning inventory. Why do you have to deduct this? Because this one is an output from last period. Okay? Your input, no, or your output for this period is the percentage of anong tawag mo doon? Kaya kabaliktaran ng completion. Non-completion. Which means 60% yung ginawa mo. Yun lang naman sa akin. Okay? If these are already completed for this period. But if, for example, no, at the beginning is 40% completed and then at the end it's 50% completed, therefore your EUP for this item is only 10%. Ganun. So you remove this because this pertains to last period. Okay, so let's use the earlier example. We started with 200, okay? And then you have 5,000 for 8 yung completed. At the end of the period, you now have 400. Let's put that into T accounts. Beginning, 200. Ending, 400. Your started in process is 5,000. Question, how much is the started, completed, and transferred? Okay, this is actually your started in process minus the ending balance. This is your started in process. So out of 5,000 minus 400, the started, completed, and transferred is actually how much? 4,600. Okay, but how many units were actually completed and transferred? It's 4,800. Okay, yung 200 pumunta dyan. Okay, so 200 plus 4,6, you now have 4,800. Your 5,000, okay, 400 of that went to your ending inventory. So out of 5,000, only 4,600 was completed. Okay, so pumunta siya doon. Now, let's continue. I just want to emphasize one thing, no? Okay, so you have the beginning inventory at, asan na? Wait lang. O, tama. 90 and 40. Take note that in this approach, the EUP is computed as follows. Okay, kanina in the weighted average, we used 4,800 plus 160, right? Okay, this time you have 4,600. This is your started and completed. Yung nanggaling sa last slide, yung kinompute natin. Started, completed, and transferred. That's 5,000 minus 400. Okay, this is the percentage of your inventory. Beginning percentage of uncompleted. Tama ba yung English ko doon? Okay, if it's 55% completed, let's go back to the previous slide. If it's 55% completed, yes, it's 55% completed for materials, 30% for conversion. So, ang ginawa mo for this period is the difference. 100 minus 55, you get 45. Oops, 55. Yan. This one is 100%. Okay, percent po yan. Minus 30%, you'll now have 70%. Okay, kasi 55 and 30%, trinabaho nila yan last period. Ang trinabaho mo ngayon is the difference, which is 45% and 70%. Okay? Plus, of course, what was started end completed, and the percentage of completion for the ending. Yan yung mga trinabaho mo ngayon. So you get 4,850 as the EUP using FIFO. Now, using the approach earlier, okay, wherein we started with the completed and transferred, and completed and transferred plus the percentage of completion for your ending balance, no, you will now get the EUP for your weighted average. From there, you deduct the percentage of completion of your beginning balance, and you will now get the equivalent unit of production for FIFO, di ba? So, let's try to apply this, no? Assuming materials muna tayo. Ano ba yung completed and transferred natin? You have 48. Okay. And then the percentage of completion for the ending balance is, asan na yun? Ito, for materials, it's 400 times 40%. So, you have 160. The EUP for weighted average is 4,960. Less the percentage of completion for the beginning balance, okay, which is 55%, no? 55%. Take note, this one is what is not completed, no? So, 55% completed yung 200. Ano yun? That's 110, right? No, mapapahiya yata ako dito. Wait lang. 5. Ayun, parehas lang. No? So, pwede mo pagsabayin. EUP weighted average and EUP FIFO. 4,960. 4,850. Balikan nga natin. Ito na naman si Erorita eh. 4,960. Ano, that's a different example. Let's use the other example. Is this the one? Tan 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 tan. Tan 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 tan. Huh? Ayun. You have 4,960 as the EUP. Kala ko mapapahiya ako. This is your EUP for this example, no? For the weighted average. So from 4,960, you simply deduct the percentage of completion of the beginning inventory. Ayan. Ayun, which is 55%. 55% times 200, that's 110. Oops, balik tayo. Ayan. So you have 4,850. Now, let me know in our discussion board if you will arrive at 4,840, okay, as the EUP for FIFO if you use this approach. Sige na nga, i-compute na natin. 4,8. Tanong-tanong pa ako, no? Isosolve ko rin lang pala, no? Percentage of completion ending inventory, 25% times 400, that will be 100. Okay, so for weighted average, you will now have 4,9. Okay, sana hindi ako mapahiya dito. Or sana magkamali ako para hanapin nyo kung saan ako nagkamali. And then minus the percentage of completion for the beginning, that's 30% times 200. 30% times 200, magkano po yun? Is that 60? Okay, so minus yan. 4,9 minus 60, you will get 4,840. Ayun, siya pala yun. Okay. Now that you have your EUP FIFO, you can now compute for the cost per EUP. Ayan. Now, kanina, no? Now tapos kanina. Kanina, the cost for EUP using your weighted average, okay, includes, sulat ko na nga, okay, your cost per equivalent unit of production under weighted average, okay, is computed by adding the cost of the beginning work in process plus your total manufacturing cost. This is your cost this period. You divide that by your EUP using weighted average. Now, if you are supposed to compute for the cost per EUP under FIFO, because it's already first in, first out, don't include the beginning balance. Okay? You just use the total manufacturing cost or cost this month, no, divided by your EUP using first in, first out. So, in this case, hindi niya sinama yung 15,175. You will just use 368,600 and 350,900. Okay po? Alright. So, from there, you divide that by the EUP, which is computed earlier. This is now the cost per equivalent unit of production when it comes to materials and as to conversion costs. Okay, so now you know your total cost to be accounted for. And let's reconcile that. Okay, this is the cost of the beginning and the current period, which went to your ending and completed and transferred, diba? Okay, so this is now your started and completed in May. Okay, so you have 4,600. Dapat alam natin kung saan nanggaling yan. Using weighted average, we use 4,800. Okay, and then you get the percentage of completion, okay, for the ending period. You multiply that with your cost per EUP. Get the total. It should be equal to your cost as accounted for. So, if that is equal, then, diba? Ang ganda, di nag-reconcile. Ganun lang siya. Okay, your cost to be accounted for is equal to your cost as accounted for. Now, there are some cases wherein your cost as accounted for is less than your total cost to be accounted for. Okay, that will be discussed in the next chapters siguro, no, when we talk about lost units. Ayan. So that will now be your next assignment. Okay, how are you going to account for lost units? Lost units for weighted average or lost units for first in, first out. Ayan. Lost units if they happen at the beginning of the process, during the process, or at the end of the process. Okay, or loss units when they are considered as normal losses or abnormal losses. Okay, so those will be your assignments. Okay, so I guess that's it, no? Ano yung mga kailangan nating tandaan dito? Okay, number one, you should be able to compute for your EUP. How do you compute for your equivalent units of production? It depends if we are using weighted average or your first in, first out. Using weighted average EUP, we normally start with the completed and transferred, and then alam ko na. Sulat ko na nga. So you have here your materials. Assuming uneven, no? Uneven tayo. Ibig sabihin, magkaiba yung percentage of completion for materials and conversion costs. So, you start with your completed and transferred. Okay? From your completed and transferred, you add the percentage of completion of the ending balance. Ending balance of your work in process. Okay? And you will now have the equivalent units of production for weighted average. And then from there, you deduct the percentage of completion, no, for the beginning balance of our work in process And you will now get the EUP for your first in, first out. Okay, to compute for your cost per EUP, what's EUP? Equivalent units of production. Okay, using let's say weighted average. Okay, so using weighted average, dito tayo. Using weighted average, the cost per EUP will be computed by adding the beginning balance of your work in process, beginning cost, no? I'm talking about the cost, plus the cost this month, or your total manufacturing cost. Okay? And then you divide that by, dito na lang. You divide this by, EUP, using, of course, weighted. Ano ba to? Inaantok na yata yung panulat ko. Weighted average. Ayan. And then, if we are using FIFO naman, using FIFO, your cost per EUP will be simply, tatanggalin mo na yung beginning, no? You have cost this month. What is your cost this month? Simply your total manufacturing cost. Alam na dapat niyo yan, your direct labor, direct materials, and factory overhead. Divided by EUP, computed using the FIFO. Okay po. Ano pa yung mga kailangan nating malaman dito? Maybe your work in process. Very important, no? You have the beginning balance and ending balance. In terms of, this one is in terms of quantity. Ayan. Okay, you have here your, ano nang tawag natin dito? Started in process. Started in process. Not necessarily completed, no? And then here you have your completed and transferred to other department. Okay, normally this one will be completed, so it will go there. A part of your started in process will also be completed, it will go there. Okay, what is not completed will go to your ending balance. Ayan, ayaw na, ayun, naghang lang pala. What is not completed will go to your ending balance. Okay, so etong part na to, this part right here, what was started, completed, and transferred for the period. Kailangan kasi yan, no, if you're going to compute for the EUP, FIFO using the previous approach, if you're not using this approach, no, kailangan mo to. Ano to? This is your started, completed, and transferred. This is actually the difference of started in process minus the beginning inventory. Diba? Kasi beginning inventory, pag natapos yan, pupunta rin siya dito. And so you remove that, and what you have is the number of units which were started this period, no, and completed at the same time. Okay, so ano pa? Okay, dapat alam din natin yung cost of production report, no, na counterpart ito ng cost sheet dun sa job order costing natin. Okay, what are the different parts, no? Okay, so first you have computation of equivalent units of production. And then number 2, okay, your cost to be accounted for. Let's write that down. Cost to be accounted for, okay, together with your computation of cost per EUP. And then the third part, okay, will now be your cost as ano? Accounted. Cost as accounted for. Ito yung reconciliation portion natin. Okay po. So, I guess that's it, no? If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in our discussion board. So, that's it for process costing and your cost of production report. Okay? And thank you po.